Have you heard the shocking news about Rick Harrison's son, Corey Harrison, and the crisis threatening both his freedom and the legacy of Pawn Stars? It began with a top-secret federal investigation into allegedly forged Civil War artifacts sold through the gold and silver pawn shop. Now whispers of indictments, a courtroom showdown, and a possible prison sentence have cast a dark shadow over the world's most famous pawn family, and the ending could be more heartbreaking than anyone expected. Rick Harrison, the Don of Las Vegas pawnbrokers, built his reputation on honesty, a sharp eye for value, and the old-fashioned integrity he learned from his father, Old Man Richard Harrison. His son Corey grew up behind the shop counter, learning from the best while forging his own identity as the brash tattooed hoss. Together, they transformed a dusty pawn shop into a pop culture phenomenon, starring in over 500 episodes of Pawn Stars and sealing their family bond in front of millions. But beneath the cameras and flashy negotiations, tensions simmered. Sources say Corey always felt pressure to prove himself worthy of the Harrison name. He branched off into side ventures, collectible ventures, rare coin shows, and private deals outside the televised auctions. Those moves once seemed promising, until federal agents quietly subpoenaed records from the shop's archives and personal emails. Investigators claim dozens of supposedly authentic battlefield relics and handwritten letters had been doctored before hitting the display cases. In early spring, agents swooped in on the Las Vegas store for what was billed as a routine audit. Instead, they seized files, took down serial numbers on antique firearms, and confiscated so-called mint-condition memorabilia. Employees were stunned as armed officers hauled away trunks of evidence. The raid marked the first time the Harrison empire faced public scrutiny beyond a reality TV storyline. Overnight, viewers' favorite father-son duo earned a new reputation, alleged facilitators of high-end forgery. Accusations center on a rare collection of Confederate correspondence credited to General Robert E. Lee. Documents sold for six-figure sums turned out to bear anachronistic watermarks and mismatched signatures. Experts consulted by the FBI analyzed ink composition and paper aging, concluding several pieces dated no earlier than the 1990s. Those findings contradicted Pawn Stars' on-screen verifications, footage carefully edited to show Corey handling the items with veteran appraisal skills. Witnesses inside the shop say Corey grew defensive once agents produced lab reports. He purportedly claimed innocence, blaming a trusted consultant who supplied the documents. Yet federal prosecutors argue that Corey and his consulting partner orchestrated the scheme, cozying up to collectors and forging provenance certificates to inflate prices. If convicted on multiple counts of mail fraud and conspiracy, Corey could face decades behind bars and millions in restitution. News of the investigation spread like wildfire across social media. Hardcore Pawn and Antiques Roadshow fans traded theories, while mainstream outlets spun sensational headlines. Some commentators expressed disbelief. Corey, the straight-talking son of the king of authenticity, could be a master forger. Others mourned the potential fall of a reality TV icon. Beneath the memes and hot takes, a real family, Rick, Corey, and the late old man braced for the public reckoning. Rick Harrison, known for his poker face and quick banter, now finds himself in an impossible bind. Sources report he's torn between supporting his son unconditionally and protecting Pawn Stars' brand. Behind closed doors, Rick consulted top lawyers in Washington, D.C. to craft a defense, and considered firing Corey's consulting partner to distance the show from scandal. Yet fatherly loyalty and decades of shared success make any split deeply wrenching. Corey's finances are also in freefall. Lawsuits from duped buyers demand restitution, and the IRS has opened its own probes into his personal accounts. His side businesses, once lucrative extensions of the Pawn Stars name, have dried up as collectors avoid any Harrison-affiliated deals. Facing legal fees and a damaged reputation, he's reportedly exhausted most of his savings. Some fear he may lose not only his freedom, but the very pawn shop he grew up in. Even relationships outside the shop are fraying. Corey's marriage reportedly hangs by a thread, as his wife grapples with public humiliation and the toll of mounting legal battles. Friends describe late-night calls filled with tears and regret. Meanwhile, Rick's daughter Samantha has kept her distance, worried the family drama could derail her own Nashville music career. The image of a united show business clan rapidly unravels. Viewers have watched Rick and Corey negotiate gold chains and vintage guitars, but this real-life conflict looms far larger. Lawyers for the defense have hinted at a plea deal in exchange for cooperation against higher-level figures in the forgery network. Prosecutors, however, vow to pursue the case aggressively, to send a message that no one is above the law, not even the most famous pawnbroker in America. Inside federal court filings, a mountain of evidence documents how the investigation unfolded. The complaint, stamped and sealed with an April date, describes wiretapped calls in which Corey Harrison and his consulting partner allegedly boasted about striking gold with rare documents. Transcripts detail conversations referencing watermarks and forged signatures on Civil War letters. Unredacted lab reports appended to the filing confirm that multiple pages bore polymer-based coatings inconsistent with 19th century materials. During the raid, FBI agents secured audio files captured on hidden microphones placed by investigators posing as clients. One clip reveals Corey discussing an exclusive handshake with a private collector, guaranteeing provenance certificates sewn into official files. Court exhibits include scanned invoices that falsified the date of a reputed battlefield relic purchase. A metallurgist's affidavit, filed as Exhibit G, described microscopic analysis of metal alloys, dating several artifacts to post-World War II manufacturing. Legal motions filed by Corey's defense team challenged the admissibility of forensic findings, arguing chain of custody gaps and improper storage compromised sample integrity. Defense attorneys claimed that critical evidence was held in non-climate-controlled environments, causing discoloration that misled laboratory instruments. They have petitioned for an independent retesting of select items, insisting that contested letters might still be genuine. The judge granted a limited hearing to examine these procedural objections before proceeding to trial. Meanwhile, seized documents from gold and silver pawn contain detailed price sheets tracking how forged items were marketed. One spreadsheet lists an exclusive Bonnie Parker correspondence sold at $150,000, with a 40% markup built into the margin. Emails between Corey and his partner describe cleaning up descriptions to avoid questions from veteran collectors. Another file shows canceled checks and wire transfers made to shell companies allegedly controlled by a forger operating overseas. Inside Pawn Stars, employees report a growing atmosphere of fear after the initial subpoenas arrived. Staff members were instructed to destroy personal notes and work logs to comply with FBI orders, raising concerns about lost context. One longtime appraiser, granted anonymous testimony in court, said he noticed items appearing on shelves without proper vetting, then departure memos from the chief cataloger. The appraiser's declaration paints a picture of systemic neglect amid production schedules. At a bail hearing last month, a federal magistrate denied Corey's request for release on the grounds that he posed a flight risk and might tamper with evidence. Prosecutors argued that Corey's international connections included consultants in Switzerland and Hong Kong who could facilitate hiding assets. The magistrate granted limited supervised release only after Corey agreed to surrender his passport, wear a GPS monitor, and submit to daily check-ins with a U.S. Marshal. Financial forensic experts have traced a complex web of LLCs linked to Corey's side businesses. Hidden ownership records reveal that profits from rare coin conventions, valued at over $500,000, were funneled through offshore vehicles. Court-appointed auditors discovered that invoices from one Nevada-based supplier listed inflated fees for authentication services that matched the dollar amounts later refunded by unsuspecting buyers. These patterns form the backbone of the prosecution's fraud charges. While the trial date remains tentative, defense lawyers are preparing an aggressive strategy. They will call expert witnesses in metallurgical journals to dispute the timing of alleged forgeries, arguing that some documents could have naturally aged or been artificially treated decades ago. The defense also plans to present character affidavits from community leaders who attest to Corey's integrity and charitable work, seeking to paint a broader picture of a man not driven to crime by greed. Outside the courthouse, supporters and critics clash daily. A rally organized by a collectors association demands Corey's exoneration, claiming pent-up frustration over overzealous investigations in the antiques industry. Opponents hold counter-protests arguing that lax oversight allows rampant fraud. On social media, Hashtags like #TeamHaas battle #Justice for collectors. These dueling crowds underscore how the case has become a flashpoint for broader debates over authenticity, regulation, and the delicate balance between trust and skepticism. Meanwhile, Rick Harrison has been keeping a low profile. He canceled upcoming television specials and postponed the shop's anniversary events indefinitely. In private memos obtained by Reuters, Rick expressed deep disappointment and fear that the scandal could dismantle a brand built over 3 generations. Yet insiders also report moments of paternal compassion, late-night calls to Corey offering guidance and reassurance that the family would endure whether behind bars or back behind the counter. As the legal battle proceeds, executives at the History Channel review contract options if Corey becomes unavailable. Producers consider spin-off episodes focusing on Rick and new hires to sustain the brand. The scandal underscores how fame can turn to infamy and highlights the fragile nature of reputation in an industry built on trust and authenticity. Time will decide all. Corey's life shifted into a relentless cycle of legal strategy sessions, deposition prep, and sleepless nights. After the bail hearing, his defense team scheduled a series of depositions to undermine the government's case. In a wood-paneled conference room near the courthouse, Corey sat across from his lead attorney, reviewing transcripts line by line. He studied his own recorded interviews, searching for any misstep prosecutor could exploit. Every word mattered, each phrase risked revealing intent. When his lawyer asked how he described the provenance of the Confederate letters, Corey lapsed into silence, his jaw clenching. "I said what I believed at the time," he finally murmured. "I never meant to defraud anybody." Outside, the media circled like vultures. TV news crews erected satellite trucks on Fremont Street, and local anchor teams peppered fans with cameras, craving soundbites. "Did you lose faith in Corey?" one reporter shouted as he left the conference room. He offered only a curt, "no comment," before sliding into a dark sedan. Cameras focused on the GPS ankle monitor under his pant leg, a daily reminder of both his conditional freedom and the strict limits on his movements. Each televised shot of that device magnified the stakes. A single violation could send him back to custody immediately. Inside the gold and silver pawn shop, business limped along. Rick Harrison manned the counter personally, greeting customers with an uncharacteristic hesitance. "We're in unprecedented times," he confessed quietly to a regular at the bench. Loyal customers offered words of support, but many eyed the shop's vault warily. One collector asked for detailed paperwork on a Civil War rifle sale, unnerved by the headlines. Rick complied, hauling out yellowed provenance files and laying them on the countertop, but the request cost him hours of work and the implicit confidence of his clientele. While the shop remained open, its reputation teetered on each handshake and printed receipt. Corey's personal relationships fractured under the strain. His wife, Britt, struggled to balance family duties with mounting public scrutiny. She dropped her regular Saturday classes at the cosmetology school and spent evenings consoling their 2 young children, neither of whom understood why Daddy was suddenly so stressed. In the hushed gloom of their living room, she tried to explain that their family was going through a hard time. He watched her voice tremble, guilt knotting his stomach. On one crisis night, he sank onto the couch and buried his face in his hands. "I'm trying to fix this," he whispered, but words felt inadequate. Corey's sister Samantha distanced herself to protect her own fledgling music career. In Nashville studios, she replaced her Instagram avatar with a neutral logo and declined radio interviews. Industry friends noted her sudden disappearance from social media, but few understood why she refused to be seen alongside her brother Storm. Behind closed doors, she messaged Corey, "I love you but I can't do this publicly." Those words stung sharper than any courtroom cross-examination. Amid the turmoil, Rick faced his own crossroads. In legal briefings, his consultants advised severing Corey's partnership with the shop, inserting a management team to buffer the brand. One option even suggested a public reboot episode of Pawn Stars, featuring Rick and new recruits. Each proposal felt like a betrayal of family ties. Late one night in his private office, Rick cradled a framed photo of himself with Corey and the late old man Harrison. His eyes glistened as he wrote in his journal, "My son is not a business transaction." The next morning, he formally filed paperwork to add a limited liability clause isolating the shop's corporate entity from Corey's personal dealings. It was a compromise between paternal loyalty and brand protection. Meanwhile, prosecutors prepared a superseding indictment, expanding charges to include additional counts of wire fraud and conspiracy. Court filings described Corey's alleged role as co-conspirator in a systematic effort to defraud collectors nationwide. The expanded charges carried a potential sentence of over 15 years. Defense lawyers scrambled to file motions seeking to dismiss the new counts as legally deficient, but judges showed little sympathy. In pre-trial hearings, the government produced intercepted emails in which Corey and his partner discussed cleaning up certificates and padding margins. When those documents flashed on courtroom projectors, even his staunchest allies winced. The prosecution's star witness, a private collector turned informant, agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. Known only in court papers as Collector A, this individual described a lavish lifestyle funded by rare artifact deals. He claimed to have personally handled forgeries sent to Corey's shop and then witnessed the Pawn Star's son personally inspect and approve them. If true, those statements threatened to gut the defense. Corey's legal team subpoenaed bank records and flight logs to prove he had never visited the informant's home before the transactions, attempting to discredit the testimony as opportunistic and self-serving. As the pre-trial period drew to a close, both sides jockeyed for advantage. The defense prepared to call little-known historians to challenge forensic dating methods, while the prosecution arranged depositions of lab technicians. Each witness brought technical expertise, but neither side could guarantee how jurors would interpret complex scientific analyses. News outlets ran explainer segments on chromatography and paper fiber testing, turning forensic science into primetime spectacle. Viewers toggled channels, debating whether Corey was a savvy wheeler-dealer ensnared by circumstances or a calculated purveyor of fraud. On the eve of the evidentiary hearing, Corey met with his father for a private dinner at Rick's home. They ate in silence for the first minutes. Then Rick reached across the table. "No matter what happens," he said, voice cracking, "you're my son." Corey's eyes filled with tears. "I need you," he choked. "I'll fight this with everything I have." Rick nodded, squeezing his hand, determined to stand by Corey even as the world watched the high-stakes drama unfold. Tables creaked under the weight of binders stuffed with exhibits as the evidentiary hearing began. Corey sat in the front row, sleeves buttoned tight, facing a gallery packed with journalists, collectors, and anxious spectators. The judge spoke only to affirm the admissibility of key forensic reports and witness statements. Prosecutors rose one by one, unfurling charts that mapped ink absorption rates, paper fiber analyses, and high-resolution scans of watermarks. Every scientific slide flickered on courtroom monitors, underscored by the hum of projectors and murmurs in the pews. First to testify was Dr. Elena Morales, a forensic document examiner with the federal lab. In measured tones, she explained how trace levels of modern synthetic polymers embedded in the alleged Confederate letters betrayed their recent manufacture. She passed around microscopic cross-sections showing uniform crystal patterns invisible to the naked eye. Defense lawyers objected, citing chain of custody gaps, but Morales remained resolute, reaffirming her procedures adhered to ISO accreditation standards. Her calm confidence punctured any doubt that the letters were genuine relics. Next came Collector A, escorted into the witness box under heavy security. His voice trembled as he recounted paid meetings with Corey's consulting partner, and how he personally delivered forged correspondence to the pawn shop's back office. He described being coached on terminology, how to slide in phrases like rich patina or documented in the Patterson ledger, before sealing authenticity certificates. The courtroom shifted at his words. Film crews panned to Rick Harrison in the gallery, jaw tight, a silent silhouette of paternal dread. Under cross-examination, Collector A's credibility came under attack. Defense counsel highlighted his own lucrative auction sales based on those same documents, suggesting he had every incentive to implicate Corey to avoid criminal exposure. The jurors leaned forward as he cringed, stammering over questions about bank transfers to offshore accounts. Yet, despite the defense's efforts, his account of meeting Corey face-to-face in a Las Vegas hotel lounge stood unshaken, an incontrovertible moment that struck at the heart of the prosecution's narrative. Prosecutors then introduced email logs between Corey and his partner, time-stamped late-night exchanges filled with code words. Terms like midnight oil, full moon appraisal, and dust covers filled the screen in black and white print. As the judge permitted a close reading, every juror's eyes traced the lines, "Let's finalize the Bonnie Parker letters tomorrow." Make sure the watermark's seamless, one message read. The room stood witness to the digital breadcrumbs betraying a pattern of premeditation, not innocent oversight. In an unexpected twist, the defense called Rick Harrison to the stand. His shoulders squared as he took the oath, becoming the first Harrison patriarch to testify in a criminal inquiry. He spoke of decades of upholding honesty, recounting times when he had destroyed suspect items rather than display them. He insisted that Corey had always echoed his principles and that any missteps were founded in trust, not malicious intent. His voice cracked once when referring to Corey as "my boy," and the gallery felt an ache mixed with reluctant respect. Prosecutors probed Rick on whether he'd ever intervened when red flags surfaced. He admitted to suspending a cataloger over forged internet ads and mandated refresher training for all appraisers. Yet, he drew the line at micromanaging every private deal. "I believed Corey's assessments," Rick said, eyes drifting to his son. "In hindsight, I was wrong to let my guard down." The admission added a raw authenticity to his testimony. A father's humility laid bare under oath. As the day's proceedings closed, tabloid photographers captured Corey exiting through a side door, hood drawn low, flanked by burly marshals. The evening news dissected the hearing's highlights: forensic bombshells, shattered alibis, and a father's agonizing plea. Social media threads erupted with hot takes, some decrying justice for Haas, others hailing a necessary reckoning. Pawn Stars merchandise sales reportedly dipped overnight as sponsors re-evaluated partnerships and the History Channel weighed contingency plans. In the quiet that followed, Corey returned to his temporary lodgings under supervised release. He unwrapped a leather journal and began penning reflections on the day's testimonies, the coercive weight of evidence, his father's heartbreak, and his own crumbling confidence. Each line traced fault lines in his world, reminding him of the stakes beyond headline fodder, the future of a family legacy, built on trust and integrity. Outside, Rick confided in a close friend that he'd summoned a last-ditch legal strategy meeting. They debated plea negotiations versus a full trial, deliberating whether Corey should accept responsibility for lower counts in exchange for avoiding the harshest sentences. The debate mirrored the courtroom's duality, the uncertain promise of mercy against the immutable demands of justice. As night fell over the Las Vegas Strip, neon lights blinked like distant constellations guiding travelers home. Inside the Harrison residence, a solitary lamp bathed Rick's study in soft glow. He stared at framed photos of a younger Corey behind the pawn counter, dust motes dancing in the lamplight. Tomorrow promised new challenges: evidentiary hearings on the admissibility of offshore records, more witness cross-examinations, and the looming question of whether the Harrison name could survive the crucible of public trial. But in that quiet moment, father and son shared an unspoken resolve. No matter the outcome, the bond forged behind those counters and camera lenses would loom larger than any court verdict. As Rick closed his journal, and Corey settled into a restless sleep under electronic surveillance, the Harrison saga entered its darkest act, only to test the meaning of family, fame, and redemption under the unforgiving glare of the law. The days after the evidentiary hearing felt like a slow-motion blur of strategy sessions, media blitzes, and family reckonings. Rick Harrison convened a meeting at the shop's executive suite, gathering his in-house counsel, publicists, and a crisis management team flown in from Washington. They pored over viewer metrics and sponsor contracts, noting that several key advertisers had quietly paused their ad buys until the trial's outcome became clearer. One network executive warned that if Corey's case stretched into a full trial, Pawn Stars might lose its primetime slot entirely. Rick absorbed the news stoically, then quietly instructed his team to negotiate contingency clauses that would allow the show to continue without Corey if necessary. Meanwhile, Corey spent his days under the watchful eyes of U.S. Marshals, shuttling between depositions, supervised home visits, and daily check-ins. He rarely saw his father outside the courtroom. In the rare moments alone, he burned through journals and legal pads, wrestling with questions of intent and regret. His mornings began with voice messages from his defense attorney outlining plea, deal possibilities, reducing counts in exchange for cooperation or testimony against his consulting partner. Corey's heart pounded at each new update. He understood the weight of a plea but feared its stigma. "I can't admit to something I didn't fully know," he told his lawyer. The lawyer replied gently, "We'll find the truth in the fine print." At the shop, Rick tried to maintain normalcy. He greeted customers behind the counter, offered casual banter to regulars, and broke out in laughter at old Pawn Stars bloopers, rare glimpses of levity amid the storm. Staff reported that he began adopting new rituals: daily morning scrolls through the latest headlines to gauge public sentiment, evening prayer readings in the stockroom, and late-night calls to Corey, offering encouragement that doubled as fatherly lessons in resilience. Yet each smile felt borrowed, as though Rick wore a mask of humor to conceal the ache of uncertainty. Corey's wife, Britt, became an unspoken pillar of strength. She navigated school drop-offs for their kids, coordinated childcare schedules around Corey's court appearances, and moderated online comments on his behalf. In quiet text threads with close friends, she described midnight calls when Corey would break down, confessing fears of letting down the old man legacy. Britt responded with words of solidarity: "We'll weather this together, and I choose our family over any verdict." Those private exchanges formed the backbone of Corey's emotional survival, even as trial dates loomed and public opinion polarized. With trial on the horizon, defense counsel launched a public relations offensive, humanizing Corey through controlled interviews with local newspapers. They highlighted his charitable contributions, discounted loans to veterans, scholarships funded through shop proceeds, and sponsorship of youth sports leagues. One feature in the Las Vegas Review-Journal portrayed him as Hoss the Helper, emphasizing that mistakes could be made outside the glare of cameras. Still, comments online ranged from sympathetic to scathing. #Free Hoss trended alongside #Fraud Family, underscoring the case's emotional complexity. Rick quietly met with the shop's board of directors to discuss the future of the Pawn Stars brand. Options ranged from a temporary hiatus for the show, to a spin-off featuring Rick and Samantha, to a rebrand under a new family name, each fraught with legal and emotional implications. Samantha, back from Nashville for the summer, attended the meeting via video call. She urged unity and authenticity. "We built this on trust. Let's show viewers how families pull through adversity." Her words resonated, yet the board's financial projections warned that every week without Corey could cost the network millions in ad revenue and risk contract renewals. In court, prosecutors edged closer to trial by scheduling witnesses whose testimony could prove fatal, the consulting partner facing separate charges, lab technicians ready to reaffirm polymer evidence, and disgruntled collectors lining up to recount their experiences. Each witness promised to chip away at the defense's narrative of innocent error. Defense lawyers filed emergency motions to exclude certain lab results, alleging procedural missteps during evidence collection. Judges set new hearing dates to examine those motions. The courtroom calendar filled with deadlines that threatened to stretch well beyond the next televised season. Amid the chaos, Rick found refuge in an unspoken ritual: nightly text exchanges with a former Pawn Stars consultant turned family friend. They exchanged gospel-inspired messages, offered audio prayers at midnight, and reminded each other of the years they'd weathered storms before: housing market crashes, show spin-offs, and personal losses. These spiritual check-ins kept Rick anchored, a reminder that legacy extends beyond ratings and legal maneuvers. One pivotal moment came when Corey's defense team secured an expert in document preservation to challenge the prosecution's claims. In a secluded warehouse, the expert demonstrated how certain ink discolorations could result from benign archival processes rather than deliberate forgery. A terse video of the demonstration was entered into court records, offering a glimmer of hope that jurors might question aspects of the government's narrative. Corey watched the footage in a remote video link, relief washing across his face for the first time in weeks. As summer approached, the family braced for what many considered the trial's opening day. Press trucks lined the courthouse steps, and fans gathered lawn chairs in the scorching Nevada heat. Rick and Britt walked the perimeter together, calm exteriors edging toward weariness. Corey, escorted past roaring crowds, offered a faint wave, an unspoken acknowledgement of the toll public scrutiny had exacted on every facet of their lives. In the final pre-trial conference, defense lawyers and prosecutors hashed out the fate of contested exhibits. They negotiated which lab reports could be shown to jurors and how witness video clips would be edited. Rick sat at the defense table, flanked by Corey and their attorney, witnessing the transformation of personal artifacts into legal evidence. He clasped Corey's shoulder as the judge set a firm trial date. Both men understood that the next chapter would unfold under the most unforgiving spotlight yet. As they left the courthouse, Rick whispered to Corey, "We'll tell our story, no matter how it ends." Corey nodded, drawing strength from his father's vow, Behind them, cameras clicked and drones circled overhead, capturing 2 generations of Harrisons stepping into a trial that would test their bond, their brand, and their belief in redemption. When the trial finally opened on a sweltering September morning, the atmosphere in the Clark County District Court was electric with tension. Rows of seats reserved for reporters and collectors filled before dawn. Onlookers clustered outside cell blocks to glimpse Corey Big Hoss Harrison as he arrived in a dark suit, GPS monitor still visible above his shoe. Rick Harrison sat in the front row, face composed yet eyes shadowed by exhaustion. Lawyers from both sides hustled to their tables, and the judge cleared his throat. The trial of the pawnshop scion had begun. Prosecutors presented a concise opening statement, painting Corey as the architect of a multi-year forgery ring. They summarized lab findings, witness testimony, and the audio recordings that captured late-night scheming. Each exhibit, blue lupine petals pressed between letters, Word document metadata showing digital tampering, was trotted out like a pawned item beneath a jeweler's lamp. Scrutinized for inconsistencies, the jury leaned forward as a forensic expert demonstrated how polymer coatings and modern bleaching agents betrayed the purported Civil War documents. When the expert turned to Corey, who sat stone-faced, the courtroom felt the full force of intent behind every fraudulent artifact. The defense delivered its own opening with equal gravity. Corey's attorney acknowledged mistakes but insisted that his client had been the unwitting victim of a manipulative consultant. They emphasized Corey's decades of honesty on screen, his charitable work, and his lifelong commitment to preserving history. Jars of preserved ink flecks and alternate samples were presented to suggest plausible contamination scenarios, archival folders that had inadvertently introduced modern compounds. Witnesses spoke of Corey's shock upon discovering forgeries and his immediate efforts to refund buyers. One collector testified he'd received full reimbursement before the FBI raid, portraying Corey as remorseful more than malicious. Over the next 2 weeks, testimony alternated between technical experts and emotional recollections. A metallurgist described alloy compositions. A paper conservator walked jurors through cellulosic fiber aging. Even a retired military historian confirmed that genuine Confederate missives carried telltale seals absent from the forged documents. Then came the human elements. Former employees recounted Corey's sudden demand for better vetting protocols. Friends described him as a man haunted by guilt rather than greed. His wife Britt sat through much of the trial, but did not testify. Instead, the judge allowed a videotaped deposition where she described the toll on their family and pleaded for leniency. In closing arguments, prosecutors urged the jury to see beyond the veneer of reality TV fame to the hard evidence of conspiracy. They noted that 8 buyers lost more than $2 million collectively, demanding accountability as the only way to restore trust in collectibles markets. Defense counsel countered by reminding jurors of Corey's lifelong dedication to veterans' causes and youth scholarships. They invoked Rick's testimony about his son's character, his father's unwillingness to fire him despite the threat to the family brand. "This is not a crime of passion," the prosecutor said. "This was calculated fraud." The defense replied, "This is a tragedy of misplaced trust." After 2 days of deliberation, and 2 hung ballots, the jury retired for a final decisive vote. On the 3rd ballot, they returned a verdict guilty on 5 counts of mail fraud, and 2 counts of wire fraud, acquitted on lesser conspiracy charges. The bailiff's announcement hung in the air like an unhinged pawn shop door. Rick rose from his seat, face pale, and placed a steadying hand on Corey's shoulder. The 2 men exchanged a glance heavy with shared sorrow. Sentencing took place 6 weeks later. In a packed courtroom, the judge imposed a 3-year prison term and $3.2 million in restitution, citing the need for deterrence and the breach of public trust carried special weight when the defendant's brand was synonymous with authenticity. Justice was swift. Corey surrendered himself to the federal facility at Lompoc, California, where he would serve his sentence under the cordial yet watchful gaze of fellow inmates who recognized him from TV reruns. The immediate aftermath rippled through Pawn Stars. The History Channel aired a statement from Rick explaining that he would step back from on-camera roles temporarily to focus on family and business restructuring. Producers announced a spin-off, Rick Harrison's Legends, featuring guest appraisers and rotating family allies. Network contracts included severance clauses, allowing the series to continue without Corey. Sponsors quietly replaced him in ads. Licensed merchandise featuring Haas's likeness was pulled or rebranded. Viewer ratings dipped initially, but recovered somewhat once Rick's solo episodes debuted, though longtime fans lamented the absence of the younger Harrison's banter. Corey's family bore the weight privately. Britt managed daily life from afar, tending to their children with help from relatives. In letters smuggled out of prison, Corey wrote of regret and hope, pledging to return home, humbled and wiser. Rick visited twice a month, Spartan meetings behind plexiglass that felt more like business conferences than father-son reunions. He emerged from those visits in quiet reflection, journaling in a worn leather notebook. Our empire is built on trust. Now it's my turn to rebuild that foundation. Public opinion remained divided. Some viewed the sentence as just recompense for white-collar crime. Others deemed it unduly harsh, arguing that a plea deal might have spared him prison. Pawn industry insiders debated regulatory reforms for appraisals and collector protections. Pawn Stars memorabilia, once collectible itself, entered a new market as tokens of a scandal more than celebratory souvenirs. Yet amid the ruins, glimmers of hope remained. The Harrison family's charitable arms, the Gold and Silver Give Back Foundation, continued awarding grants. Samantha resumed her music career, releasing a concept album about forgiveness and resilience that critics hailed as her most honest work. Rick hosted community events at the shop, teaching youth about both pawnbroking fundamentals and the importance of integrity. As for Corey, he enrolled in a prison education program, studying documentary appraisal methods in hopes of returning to history preservation upon release. In the end, the Harrison saga underscored a tragic lesson: fame and fortune cannot insulate one from accountability. Corey's fall from reality, TV prominence into a federal prison cell became a cautionary tale about power, trust, and the cost of compromising principles. Yet even in the darkest closing act, the family bond endured, testament to the belief that redemption, however delayed, can emerge from ruin. As the shop sign glowed at dawn on the Vegas Strip, Rick stood beneath its marquee one quiet morning before open. He looked skyward, a familiar sparkle in his eye mingled with new humility. The Pawn Stars saga would continue, altered, tempered, reshaped, but in every new deal cut and every honest appraisal made, echoed the hard-won conviction that trust once broken must be rebuilt one pawn at a time.